Susie,
Rob.
when you were younger, much younger, a little girl, perhaps, I don't know, I don't want to cast aspersions on how old you are. Did you ever think that we'd be able to imagine what dinosaurs would look like in such amazing detail and what their appearance would be now?
Well, no, I didn't even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I used to do tours of the dinosaur gallery and tell people we'd never know what colour dinosaurs are. And, it turns out that was wrong. So I think it's incredible what we know now.
Are you suggesting you weren't a young girl 10 years ago?
No comment.
You've given the game away there. But I guess what surprised me is that what the shocker for me has been the diversity of stuff, right? It's not just the fact that, oh, look, we've got some feathers. It's like, oh, the panoply of different options of the way to adorn your dinosaur or reptile, or even the fact that we could look at dinosaur bum holes, dare I say. Well, I shouldn't say that. I should say cloaca, shouldn't I? That is the cloaca?
Potato. I don't know. But do you know the thing that I have often mulled on, Rob, is that cloaca would be quite a pretty girl's name, wouldn't it, if it wasn't for the fact that it means bum hole in reptiles?
That's a nice thought. I was going to say, maybe, I don't know what the male equivalent is, but the cloaca is unisex, right? It's very 21st century. You can go whatever you want. I nevertheless wouldn't recommend it. But let's find out about dinosaur bum holes today. So this week, Susie, you're going to tell me about two papers, potentially, about some exceptionally preserved skin and appearance of some reptile type things. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Rob. And I mean, this is taking us back to a couple of podcasts we've done in the past, haven't we? Because we've been looking at integument a couple of times before. So integument being, covering of bodies. So our very first podcast that we did, in fact, I was sitting right here in this very small, same pod, was on, was it plesiosaur skin? It was
plesiosaur, yeah. Plesiosaur.
We're going to do this all day.
All day long.
And then we did one on the Triassic weirdo, the Triassic punk. Do you remember, with the incredible back things that are definitely not feathers, but we have these incredible kind of strange feather-like structures extending from its back. And that was all about how, we're really pushing the boundaries of what reptiles were doing with their integument. And this is what we're going to talk about today as well, with two papers that have come out in the last few weeks, actually, haven't they? And the one that I'm going to focus on most, because actually I think it's a tiny bit more interesting, is one called Cellular Level Preservation of Cutaneous Spikes in an Early Cretaceous Dinosaur. And it was published by Haolong et al. When was it published? It was published on the 6th of February, so just the other day. And it came out in Nature, Ecology and Evolution. And Haolong et al., they are mostly from China, from Anhui, but there's also some European and American colleagues on the paper as well. And what this paper is doing is describing a new iguanodontian. So iguanodontians, again, is something we've talked about, dinosaurs we've talked about in the past. They're herbivorous dinosaurs. And we have talked about the hadrosaurs, most recently in terms of mating and how they mated, and Hadrosaur Kama Sutra. And iguanodontians are like early diverging members of that group. So this dinosaur is from the early Cretaceous, from about 125 million years ago. And it's from this very famous rock formation in China called the Yixian Formation. Heard of the Yixian, Rob?
Am I going to be thinking of it as the Yixian? Is that what it is? If that was spelled right, okay, but you're pronouncing it in the proper way. Yes, I have heard of it, because there's loads of amazing stuff from there, right? This is from Liaoning, sort of in the north of China, yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah. Famous.
Very, very famous place for these incredibly beautiful fossils. And this one is no exception. So this is dinosaur that is preserved, fully articulated. It's incredibly rare, but less so in Yixian Formation. It's got its skull, it's got all its forelimbs, everything's in place, it's got all its bits. It's also got a kind of envelope of soft tissue around its body. So you can see, it's an amazing specimen. Probably quite hard to study, actually, because it's kind of, you can only really see its left-hand side because it's kind of squashed flat into the rock. So that probably makes it a little bit difficult to understand all of the bones. And I would say that they've misinterpreted a couple of the skull bones. So
spicy. We're going in hot.
We're going hard. But that's not really the point of this paper, is it? I mean, the point of the paper is really the exceptional preservation of skin at cellular level resolution, and that includes scales, keratinized spikes and even individual skin cells, keratinocytes with nuclei in them. The first thing to mention, actually, which I thought had some synergies with our hadrosaur mating podcast, is they have these series of large shield-like scales that are arranged in rows along the tail, and they've got kind of big shield-like. The biggest scales are along the top of and then they get kind of slightly smaller as you go down the side of the tail. These apparently are kind of similar in their overlapping, in the way that they overlap to kind of modern reptile scales. But I thought it was interesting that they are only found in this dinosaur over the proximal part of the tail. And of course, that was the part of the tail that was being repeatedly injured in the hadrosaurs that Bertozzo and colleagues studied, and suggested that, this was actually due to mating behaviours and being mounted, and these dinosaurs being mounted. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they had these kind of large, robust scales over that part of the tail and not elsewhere.
If you're going to get mounted on that part of the tail, you do not want spikes sticking out of it. But it's the exact opposite in Stegosaurus. So we're going to come. This is probably the first time we mentioned Stegosaurus today, or last time we mentioned Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus has spikes, or not fluff. What do you call them? Tufts? I don't know.
I think we're going to call them filament. It's a filament.
Filaments.
Yeah.
Filaments. So Stegosaurus has loads of filaments sticking out of its bum. Well, not bum, out of its tail, right where you might want to be. Anyway, we shouldn't devolve into the lurid tales of dinosaur sex again. We did that last time. Don't want to be a running theme. Anyway, so it's got. Well, I guess that's interesting, right? Because it's got this combination of things. It's got the very different patterns on different parts of its body. This Haolong eye.
It has, and another thing that you can see on its body is it has a series of small rounded scales which cover kind of the neck and the body region and the hips and stuff like that. And they're not overlapping. So, but they are quite similar to the sorts of scales that you see in some other ornithischian bird-hipped dinosaurs. So we do have skin preserved in a range of different ornithischian dinosaurs, and mostly it's just made up of these kind of rounded scales. So the hadrosaurs, which we've talked about a lot, they're the duck-billed dinosaurs. They have these sorts of kind of rounded scales. Nothing particularly remarkable about them. And there's some in the basement, actually, Rob. I was looking at them yesterday when I was giving a tour. You can sort of stroke them and see what the hadrosaur skin looked like, and that's on their tails. But perhaps the most interesting thing about this is that it has a series of, well, they're called spikes, but I think they're more like filaments, really, aren't they? And they're hollow, kind of, filaments that are occurring between the scales. And some of them are tiny, so they range in length from 2 millimeters to around 4.5 centimeters. So they're quite variable in size and length. I didn't get, I can't remember, or I didn't get the answer from the paper whether there was like a distribution of different sizes in different parts. But yeah, they're hollow. So they reckon they've got kind of keratin around the outside. So keratin is a sort of protein like our fingernails are made of. Yeah, and they're situated between the scales. So this is quite interesting. We haven't ever seen anything like this at all.
Weird. It's really weird.
Yeah, in dinosaur skin. I mean, it's sort of. I don't think this is very analogous rather than the same. But you know how? I mean, I've never really stroked an elephant, but you know, like some mammals kind of have. They have like a kind of like fine sort of. It's not quite. They're not furry, but they've got sort of.
No, I know what you mean. Like occasional big coarse things.
Yeah.
Tell you what it reminded me of. This is going to sound like a weird tangent. Have you ever seen? So you and I guess, again, giving away our age, children of the 80s. There was this film in the 80s, I think, maybe in the early 90s, Dark Crystal by Jim Henson and the Muppets. You ever hear this thing? They've got these. Okay, so for the people that may have heard of this thing, it's an amazing film. It's got these enormous puppets. It's this sort of fantastical tale of this little kid trying to save this weird kingdom. But there are these horrible, ugly creatures called the Skeksis in it. And they have this sort of vulture-like head with bald, without feathers. And then on their bodies, they have all these weird, horrible, tufty projections. I guess potentially like what a coarse elephant hair might look like. I can't think of many living parallels today, other than it is just ugly. I guess it's the sad thought to think.
Yeah, it is quite ugly. The reconstruction is quite generous and makes it look very, very furry, actually, doesn't it? But I think probably, you know, some of these hairs are they're very tiny. They're like the sort of thing that, you know, you get as a woman in your 40s growing out the side of your chin. very fine kind of structures. Anyway, the authors go to some lengths to explain why these are definitely not feathers.
Right.
And of course, feathers, we know, evolved well before birds. They evolved within dinosaurs. And there's actually quite a convincing kind of evolutionary story about how feathers evolved. They started as sort of proto-feathers, as single filaments. And you can map this evolution of feathers and eventually, of course, flight feathers through dinosaur evolution and through different dinosaurs, many of them preserved from here in the Yixian Formation, where they have this incredible soft body preservation and preserves all these sorts of things. Now, they say that feathers, a major difference in the evolution of feathers and these things is that feathers evolved from solid filaments, so they're not hollow. And this is a key thing that we're seeing in these spikes or whatever they are, these kind of hairy things. And so the spikes are like sort of fundamentally different from feather precursors. And they also differ from elongated scales, which are found in modern reptiles. So the authors are actually arguing that this is yet another totally distinct type of skin appendage. So we've got another, I guess if we're going through all the different weird, crazy things that reptiles have done with their skin, you've got feathers, you've got scales, you've got various different types of scales, you've got the crazy things in the Triassic punk that look like feathers but aren't feathers, and we've got these spike-like structures in this animal as well.
Yeah, it sort of adds to the menu of ways that it might look like, because the classic idea is that everything was all scaly. All these lizards were big scaly reptiles. Then in the 90s we got this idea that actually, hang on, lots of them had feathers. But then now we've got tufts, we've got filaments, we've got spikes, we've got scales, we've got combination. And this one's weird because it's got multiple combinations on it walking around at the same time. That makes it weird. So when you think about, you couldn't answer the question, what does a dinosaur look like, with one answer. It depends on which dinosaur, which location, which fossils. I guess it's great that we're chipping away at this all the time. I guess for this one, the closest parallel, I guess, is a porcupine spider, which is the one I mentioned, I guess, which is...
Yeah, right, yeah.
Or a hedgehog, yeah. But not as thick. So I guess with a porcupine, it's all dense and whatnot. But this guy has them, at least a few centimeters, millimeters apart. So it's a bit like a slightly balding middle-aged porcupine with a scaly tail.
With a scaly tail.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to think about, what the function of these structures might have been. And the authors also go to some lengths to do this. They have suggested that there are various possible functions. They could be sensory, so they could be using them to sort of, sense things, and of course, like whiskers, I guess. But they say it could be to do with display. As you said, it looked ugly, but maybe other iguanodontians found that attractive.
So the eye of the beholder, I think, is the...
It's the eye of the beholder, Rob.
Yeah.
It could be... Go on, you were going to say...
Just give me flashbacks. I don't know if I should leave this in or not, but at my University of Oxford interview as an undergraduate when I was 18 years old, I got into this, I'd arrived off the train. I left my luggage on the train like an idiot, which I think should be disqualifying. Turned up at these very grand, impressive-looking buildings. I had no idea what's going on as a kid from the provinces in a state school. That's very confused by the whole experience. Go into some office of a professor, and he's got some objects laid out on the desk, and one of them was a dolphin skull, and one of them was a porcupine quill. And he says, "What is that?" He didn't tell me what they were. He says, "What is that?" And I say, "It looks like a porcupine quill." "What do you think it does? What is it for?" And then I, on the spot, had to think about how I would test hypotheses. I was asked to come up with hypotheses of what a porcupine quill was for, and then test hypotheses. How would I design an experiment to test it? Oh man, the stress going back. But I guess the answer might not have been terrible, because that was, I was recruited. I don't know if they still do things like that anymore. That sounds like a very old-fashioned kind of story. But when you asked me what is the function of a porcupine quill, I was suddenly getting cold sweats and terror. What was going on? Anyway, some of those ideas are very sensible, yes. But how would you test them, Susie? How would you test them?
This is the endless problem with, these sorts of structures. And I think we talked about it, at various times in the podcast, but, we talked about it when we were talking about Spicomelus, our spiky ankylosaur, that how do you test these things? I mean, the authors have opted for defense as the most likely thing. I don't know that, presumably having kind of some like little spines is going to make you a bit less appealing to a predator, but some of these are only 2 millimeters long. I wouldn't think that would be that troublesome. I mean, it's not like having a meter long spike sticking out your neck, is it?
It's tricky. I guess it's hard to know because, as is always the case with these things, we only ever get an incomplete picture, right? Like with your Spicomelis one, that's an excellent example, right? You started out with the rib, with the projections, and then you saw more of it, and then you can piece it together. But with what we're dealing with is more limited windows of, okay, this fossil is really well preserved. Like, one of the best we could hope for. But even then, we don't know what was on the right-hand side, what was on the neck, what was on the legs. Even with the best preservation in the world, you're still not able to get a proper idea about what its function would be. So ultimately, I guess we're at speculation station here. Should we just wave our arms around and think, yeah, what it would do?
But one thing that did strike me, though, that I thought was kind of interesting about this is that they say that this is a juvenile. It's quite small, actually. I think it's about 2.5 meters long, which for these dinosaurs is pretty small. And I just wondered whether this could be, I mean, the authors do suggest thermoregulation, so to help with temperature control, whether these spikes could actually be something related to its juvenile status and something related to thermoregulation because it's small.
So rather than thinking of a middle-aged balding man, the model should be a spotty teenager who's getting his first flushes of facial hair and is quite embarrassed. Like, leave me alone.
Maybe he just hasn't started shaving yet.
That's what's happened here, yeah.
So I thought about this because I think that I'm you can write in and tell me I'm wrong, but I think that there are some juvenile meat-eating dinosaurs. So I think maybe even kind of juvenile tyrannosaurids, where we have juveniles that are feathered and then we don't see that in the adults. Or that's been a suggestion that maybe there were things that were feathered or had feathery integument as juveniles and then lost it as adults. And so I wondered whether, so they say that the Yishan environment was quite cool, was quite seasonal. And so maybe, if you're small and in that environment, you need a feathery coat to keep warm. But as you get bigger, you can maintain your body temperature better just because you're big. And so I wondered whether there could be some juvenile, that these could be, some of this could be juvenile features and they could be lost. But
that makes me think that if you were going to think about thermoregulation, surely small tufty bits is better. But then maybe there would be a preservation that maybe it did have small tufty bits on it, but only the thick ones with the hollow things were better preserved. Who knows? But I guess we're in speculation stations, aren't we? It's a lovely fossil.
We could test this. What you could do is you could make a patch of skin, and I guess we'd have to speculate about how movable these things are. But we have fine hair on our skin, right? And the idea is that when you're cold, the hairs stand up, and the idea is that it kind of traps a layer of air against your skin and should help to keep you warm. So I guess you could model that.
I'm going to go and bury some porcupines out in a field and then come back and see what they are doing a few months later. I don't know if I'm going to get ethical approval for this.
No. Not about taphonomy, but about whether you could.
Oh, I see. I mean, I want to do a taphonomy experiment. I want to get a porcupine and, one that died of natural causes. I'll just go to the porcupine.
You just want to rot some porcupines. I don't know whether that's anything to do with this podcast.
No.
I think maybe just keep it to yourself, Rob.
Okay. Sorry, you were saying about testing the thermoregulation thing.
Well, I just wondered whether you could do, you could sort of do it computationally, like you could do kind of, like some sort of fluid dynamic model where you looked at whether these filaments could trap air next to the skin or something like that.
Well, more sensible. So that was what do you think the take-home messages for this paper are going to be then? I guess that there's just a whole world of stuff out there.
There is, and I probably want to come back to take-home messages, I guess, at the end. But I mean,
sorry.
It certainly shows that, dinosaur skin there are more integumentary appendages than we know out there at the moment. And I guess people have generally said, okay, ornithischians, scaley. There's a couple of these other ornithischians that we've known have some sort of filamentous integument. One you mentioned already, Psittacosaurus, which is an early member of the ceratopsian lineage, so the horned and dinosaurs, and that has some sort of filaments on its tail. There's a dinosaur called Colindodromeus, which it's from Russia, and it's currently, I think it's an early diverging ornithopod. We've got this sort of massive mess at the base of ornithopods and ceratopsians that we don't really know where all these dinosaurs fit. And I have a feeling that I think that's sitting in there at the moment. One of the problems with Colindodromeus is it's only been described in a Nature paper. And when I'm saying described in inverted commas, it's not been properly described. So
it's had its big splash, and then no one's actually gone back and done that.
And they have hundreds of specimens, but it's just not been properly described. So we don't know very much about it. But it seems to have some sort of integumentary covering. And then there's this thing called Haolong, which is currently considered to be a heterodontosaurid, and that also has some sort of filamentous integument. So you've got this range of dinosaurs from across Ornithischia, from across the Ornithischian dinosaur tree, which have, filaments, some sort of filaments. Now, the authors say that the filaments in this one are similar to those bristles that you see in Stegosaurus in terms of their structure, but they're not like the filaments in Calindrodromius or Tianlong. So, yeah, what the meaning of that? I mean, I guess there's diverse integumentary structures within Ornithischians, and more diverse than we previously thought. But yeah.
Thinking about another way, maybe that's not surprising. If you were to think about mammals for their 66 million year history post extinction of dinosaurs, you wouldn't say mammals have this particular type of integumentary structure. We've got porcupines, we've got elephants, we've got pangolins, we've got zebras, pandas. The diversity within mammals is enormous, and birds too, right? Feathers there isn't just one type of feather. There's a lot of different types of feathers with different functions. So that dinosaurs, with their they were existing for 3 times as long? I don't know. But the point is, over that period of time, ranging from the Triassic to the Cretaceous, maybe we should expect that amount of diversity.
Yeah, I think we absolutely should. And there's been a kind of move to try and interpret all of these things as proto-feathers. And I don't think there's any reason why we should think that is a kind of default setting. I think, it's totally plausible that they could have had other things going on as well as feathers. So, yeah. So the second paper, Rob.
Yes.
I want to move on to is one that some of our listeners might be familiar with, because it's the fossil butthole paper, which we spoke about on Blue Sky this week. I think it came out this week. Did it come out this week or last?
It's hot off the presses. I can't remember how quickly.
Hot off the presses. It's by Lorenzo Marchetti and colleagues. I'm just trying to find the publication date on the paper. It's published in a journal called Current Biology, 9th of March. So today is the 12th of March. So this really is hot off the press. So this is by, as I say, Lorenzo Marchetti and his colleagues from Germany. And this is a trace fossil. So I was really surprised when I opened this paper, because I wasn't expecting it to be a trace fossil. So trace fossils are the fossils, they're often described as fossilized behavior. We've talked about trace fossils also before, haven't we? Footprints. And in this case, it's like a body impression of a reptile. And the paper is significant, and that they've described this fossil because it's the oldest known fossil evidence of reptile epidermal scales. So it's from the early Permian, 299 to 295 million years ago, and this fossil's from Germany. And yeah, it's actually, they've got more than one of these. There's a couple of them, and they're basically body impressions, body, tail, and impressions, and footprints. And the footprints are quite helpful because the footprints have previously been named, or footprints very similar have previously been named as a different ichnotaxon. So they can now say that, this footprint belongs to this animal, or that this resting trace of this body belongs to the animal that formed those footprints. And we have a good idea what that animal might have been. So they call it a Paleozoic stem reptile.
So I was kind of surprised like you about this, because those footprints are lovely, right? Extra really fine detail. But that's as we've covered footprint trace fossils before. But I, like you, was also shocked about the trace fossil of being the skin of the body as well. Yeah. I'm not used to that kind of thing. I don't normally think of a trace fossil. Normally, trace fossil might be some swimming or walking or burrowing. But this is like, at that point, this stem reptile thing has sort of rested on the muddy flat and just sat there for a bit and then moved off again, potentially. But in such a way as to so delicately lay itself down on the mud as to not, because if I sit down on the mud, you better believe it's just going to be too round. Oh, so my buttocks all gone. But this reptile seems to have lowered itself down in such a way as to delicately capture all the morphology of its scales. This seems weird to me.
It does, but that does appear to be what it is, isn't it? I mean, there's also, it's obviously a very specific moment in time. They've also got raindrop marks on this slab as well. So, yeah, but it is weird that it's not blurred, isn't it? Or it's not like...
Yeah.
Yeah, the fossils are quite difficult to interpret, actually, from the pictures. One seems to have 2 tails, but I presume it moved its tail around rather than having 2 different tails. But yeah.
Perhaps be more sensible.
I don't know. Done.
There is a 2-headed reptile from China, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
Story for another time.
Yeah. So this fossil, I mean, it shows body outline. They can see the shoulder blade, where the shoulder blade rested it rested down on its shoulder blade. They can even see the dentary, so the lower jaw, where it obviously rested its head down a little bit. Although I was a bit unconvinced by that, it just looks like a long thing. But anyway, whatever. And
the bum hole.
And critically, it preserves the bum hole.
The cloaca.
Although again, did you try and look for the bum hole on the actual fossil?
Yeah, I did. Of course, I immediately opened the paper and zoomed in as quickly as I could to the images of the cloaca. So this sounds like we're being dirty perverts, but this is actually quite important, because if this is a cloaca, we should explain what a cloaca is, I guess, which is the common opening. So lots of reptiles don't have multiple openings for their genitals and feces and urine like we do, but I bet I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, but these guys have a common single opening for all of that action, and that's called a cloaca. And if it is a cloaca, that would be the first one ever recorded in fossil records. So it is of legitimate interest, not just for dirty perverts. But when you actually look at the fossil itself, I guess it's a bit underwhelming. We're looking at a small, well, what would you describe? I'm going to say crack, but that's perhaps not helpful.
I mean, I would say it is also underwhelming. I don't know.
But what did you expect? I mean, when I looked at the picture, I thought, what could it possibly have delivered? How good could it have been that I'd have gone, oh, look at that.
Oh, what a great bumhole. Yeah, it's a fair point. I don't know. I mean,
it does have it has some characteristic scales around it that imply that there is a difference or a gap in it. So it's not just like, here's a crack. It is actually, it does seem to be fairly well defended and thought through, but it's not dropping my jaw.
No, and I mean, I'm zooming in, and the interpretive drawing and the zoom in of the figure, it's quite difficult to see the scales that they've interpreted around it. But, I guess it's hard on the photo, isn't it? I'm not going to question the authors.
I get to log in to prove you're over 18 to look at these pictures.
Yeah, probably just behind a paywall rather than...
Yeah. Anyway, I should stop being so juvenile. Right, so we have this exceptional, really lovely impression of the scales, which is perhaps more relevant. Like, they don't actually spend a lot of time talking about the cloaca, even though all the news coverage about it did, because of course it did.
Of course it did. Of course it did. I mean, I think the significance of this paper really is about the implications for the evolution of reptile skin. So, it shows that epidermal scales had already evolved by the early Permian. So, yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's not that much to this paper, is there? It's just basically, you look at my cool fossil.
That's fair. It is a very cool fossil, so we should all look at it.
Yeah, that's fair. But I think these two papers together are quite nice, because they are, they're talking about integumentary structures in reptiles, and probably that, this very, very kind of primitive toolkit. So reptiles have this toolkit way, 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 way back in the earliest amniotes, really, that allows them to produce kind of complex integumentary structures. Long before we have feathers or even, the Triassic punks, feather-like structures. We're going right back to the early Permian. And all, these animals all have this toolkit. And it really depends on, how the layers of keratin accumulate, how they fold, how they grow. And that's really the only difference in the way that these integumentary structures are forming. So it's kind of all about the toolkit and this very primitive kind of evolution of integumentary structures within reptiles, and that reptiles have the potential to do all sorts of cool things. And we should probably expect loads more wacky cool fossils really to come to light in the fossil record, I think. Yeah,
so I mean, that raises the point about dinosaurs. We just spent a long time talking about it in the first paper, doing lots of weird, diverse stuff. But presumably, if dinosaurs are capable of doing that stuff, maybe non-dinosaur reptiles can be, well, pterosaurs were doing it. But we're getting plesiosaurs, we're seeing new weird stuff on it, like these go faster stripes. So I guess we might expect parareptiles and early things to have them on, we might expect a greater diversity of structures to come out yet on, I wonder what dicynodonts look like. They're like crazy creatures.
True. Yeah.
Do we have any dicynodont integument? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm putting you on the spot with a very specific question there. I'm going to go and look that up. So thanks, Susie. That's two great papers. So I guess I already asked you about the take-home messages, but we've covered that, haven't we? It's just that there's an awful lot more things yet to be found out.
And yeah, and I think this very deep this deep toolkit, or this toolkit for the potential for doing cool things with your integument, clearly evolved very early in amnio evolution.
Yeah. And initially they can sound like very silly questions, like where and when was a bum hole, and how tufty was your iguanodontian? But actually, these are really big questions about how the animals lived, functioned, and moved in the environment, right? This is core paleontological business, and often something that we can't do with just the bones.
It is, but it's also about how, Evo Devo, really, isn't it? It's about how, development of various kind of, soft tissue structures and systems in living animals. How did they evolve and when did they evolve?
Well, thank you, Susie. We better draw a line under there. Listeners, we're going to try and work on the audio quality. Susie and I are trying out different things at the moment, so apologies if that audio hasn't come out great. We're going to fix that next time, I think. And we'll wish you happy fossiling until next time. I was expecting you to say goodbye after that.
Bye.
The Fossil Files was recorded by Robert Sansom and Susanna Maidman.
We want to hear what you think. You can let us know your thoughts on the papers that we have discussed, and you can make suggestions for papers for us to talk about on our social media channels.
You can find our email address and links to our Instagram, Blue Sky and YouTube channels on our website, fossils.libsyn.com.